I'm Zach Elmblad, and you're watching a multi-part presentation of Borderline Vagabond. If you want to start at Chapter 1, you should click right here. Very well then. Chapter 11, Pancakes. We got dressed after the perfunctory post-coital cigarettes, flopped into Jasmine's car, and drove towards Chapel Hill to meet up with Hooper and Roxy for a greasy breakfast. It wasn't far away from Hooper's apartment, actually. I started to recognize streets from our reckless drives around and past visits. I figured we'd probably beat him there, even though we had left nearly an hour after I told him we'd leave. That's just how Hooper operates. He'd done this to me 1,000 times. There was no real way to know when he'd show up anywhere. He could already be sitting there, of course, but he had probably loafed around watching television for a while before getting up and around. A bewildering routine of setting down and picking up his keys, wallet, phone, sunglasses, and anything else he was trying to gather up from around the house. He lives in his own little bubble of time. A few minutes becomes an hour becomes a day becomes a week, and soon becomes never before you know it. You can't blame him. He's got a lot of projects up in the air, too many things on his mind, a lot of actionable items to check off of his list. Right now, though, the task at hand was to meet up for breakfast. When I saw the sign on the side of the road in the distance, I was suddenly very hungry for bacon and eggs. This place was your standard greaseball breakfast affair. I saw them at nearly every exit in the state. Mediocre pancakes, overcooked eggs, and shitty coffee. If you've been to one of them, you've been to all of them. The food is cooked to order on a gigantic flat grill just behind the counter. You could watch, if you wanted to, your food being slathered in oil and incessantly poked and flipped and prodded by an ex-con in a stupid hat. All manner of plans are hatched at these roadside diners. Ill-conceived plans to change, big plans to move on, small plans to meet up, plans to fulfill, and plans to ignore. It's a place for casual talk, for coming and for going. Plans made and broken all over the country in the fluorescent glow of a 24-hour breakfast joint. You could say those on the other side of the counter have seen it all, and you'd be right. These people are the true Americans, keeping us fat and happy, them trucking along in their cream cheese smeared aprons, silently and patiently waiting for their lunch break to catch a cigarette and a reminder that there's a big world out there waiting for them to take a piece of, someday, after serving that last asshole his bacon and eggs. The air inside smells like a foul mixture of fried onions, body sweat, burned toast, and oven cleaner. The buildup of grime on the tile walls casts a dusty glow into the dining room that makes it look smoky. Not a thick smoke, but just a general haze that you notice in passing and never think of again. These casual places, where we exist as humans in a plainly common type of way, are no less than surreal. These are our true public spaces, not those stuffy metropolitan museums, the austere national monuments, or the vapid state park nature trails. Oh, look, honey, this is where an Indian you've never heard of signed a treaty that got trampled all over. Let's walk around aimlessly and look at nothing. These are our spaces, those created to be occupied by anyone at any time, with no sense of attachment or meaning in the surroundings. A place for people to gather in groups, or alone, and abandon as quickly as they came. A place to forget faces, or maybe to see them in a different light. A place for the young and old, rich and poor, lost and found, familiar and strange. A place for anybody, anywhere, to gather at any time and to feel at home. A true public place.
"Party of two?"
said the perky hostess. She looked like a high schooler, wearing a thick layer of gaudy makeup, the dark roots showing on her hair that wasn't bleached quite long enough to be blonde because it burned so bad, and those black, tight-fitting waitress pants. You know which ones I'm talking about. 4, actually, I said.
"When will the rest of your party be arriving?"
Soon, hell, they could be here already. She stopped and stared up at me innocently, with very glassy, very doughish eyes. "Oh," she said flatly. "Are you that guy's friends?" "Yeah, probably. I let loose the slightest hint of an incriminating grin. You late showing corpse fucking Satan worshipping asshole. Where the fuck have you been? I heard him yelling at us from across the restaurant. Yeah, there were kids there. Mortified grandparents, giggling high schoolers, scowling socio-Luddites, and other oblivious or otherwise ambivalent groups of nobodies. They would all forget about it soon enough, retreating back to their soulless banter and syrup-dripping pancakes. We followed little Miss Buttcheeks down the aisle, past the cheap Art Deco stools and toward the booth that Hooper was sitting in. Jasmine excused herself to the restroom, and I took a seat across from Hooper. It's about fucking time. I've been here for 20 minutes, he said, thumbing his phone and keeping his head down. You said to be here an hour ago. I've been waiting an hour. You just said you'd been here 20 minutes. Fuck you. He looked at the hostess, angrily stabbing his index finger through the air in her general direction. And fuck you, too. He maintained eye contact with her for what seemed like forever. She kind of looked like she was about to cry when a guy in his mid-20s came up and put his hand on her shoulder. I've got it, Misty. It's okay, he whispered into the girl's ear. She was visibly reassured, exhaling deeply and sinking her shoulders as he said it. She walked away, sulking, and went back to her hostess's podium as Hooper laughed deeply. She'd probably wonder what she had done for the rest of the day. She wouldn't be able to understand the humor, nor would she realize he had said it for no reason other than that he saw her standing there looking like a mark. We had not gotten off to a good start in that restaurant, but no one sitting in those booths adjacent could have possibly imagined what circumstances had led us to this point in our lives. If you asked those in attendance about it now, even, they probably wouldn't remember much. Some things become repressed rather than just forgotten and subsequently remembered. The foul-mouthed 20-somethings at the breakfast joint that offended everybody. Dead pigs, eggs, and potatoes, I said, sarcastically, to the waiter, expecting him to be a rube like the poor little girl. Okay, before we get too hasty, let's start this out right. I'm Chad. He smirked, hand on his name tag. I'll be your waiter. It's nice to meet you, formality, etc., etc. Would you like your coffee cup half full, half empty, full to the brim, or not full at all? Would you like your dead pig sliced or ground? Will the tubers be diced or shredded? Care for some partially burned bread? Jasmine quietly applauded, taking a seat next to me across from the blank seat next to Hooper, which would presumably be reserved for Roxy. Full with room to breathe, sliced and shredded. I'll pass on the toast. Cool. No upsell. Nice. I like this guy, Jasmine said. Yeah, he's cool, said Hooper. They know me here. Yes, Chad interjected, gesturing with his book of guest checks. Your friend here likes to intimidate the naivete out of our innocent and unsuspecting youth. He turned toward Hooper. I'm assuming you'll be having the Denver Scramble as per usual. Denver Scramble, Hooper yelled through his teeth, hitting the table with his fist and causing the glass jars of condiments to shake and rattle. And some fucking grits, too. Grits, Chad had scribbled in his notebook as he said it, and pivoted on one foot to face Jasmine. And for the lady this morning? He asked, skillfully ignoring Hooper's outbursts. Pancakes. No pig, no egg? Pancakes. Any kind of pancakes in particular? Dealer's choice. I just want some pancakes. I'll get you something special, miss, and I'll assume you'll be treating the lady to breakfast this morning, sir? He looked at me with a cocky grin. Naturally, I said. Fuck no, I'm paying my own way. I always do, said Jasmine, tucking her chin down toward her neck and looking at me villainously. Fuck both of you. Neither one of you is paying for this. Corporate Amex trump card. He leaned forward, over the table, with his card extended from the very tips of his middle and ring fingers. We're conducting business. I said it, and that makes it true. Roxy said she wants biscuits and gravy, hot tea. Coming right up, folks. Anything else I can get you? A bucket of fucking coffee. I still haven't slept, growled Hooper. One carafe coming right up for Mr. Corporate Amex. Chad walked away, tapping his pen against the black notebook, and waving at the regular customers seated at the bar, casually sipping their cups of coffee and clearly staring in our direction. We must have been like aliens to some of those people. Sure, we were in a college town, but even college towns reserve some decency during the breakfast hours. A collectively reverent hangover, if nothing else. I kind of liked Chad in a way. He seemed intelligent, but not in that lofty academic sort of way. He seemed like he had been around the real world a while. He reeked of experience and bad decisions. Did some traveling overseas, maybe, or sniffed a few lines of adulterated cocaine. Played a few punk covers in a seedy bar. It doesn't really matter what it was that had turned him out. He seemed like he might have a good story. He had the look. Seated in the booth next to us was a foreign couple, speaking a very inflected Spanish. My best guess was that they were from deep in the mountains of somewhere in South America. I was trying to pick out what they were saying to no avail when Roxy walked up and took the empty space in the booth next to Hooper. She was wearing a hooded sweatshirt from her high school volleyball days. Her hair looked like it had been frazzled from a night of reckless abandon, then straightened up in a restaurant bathroom. They'd probably been up all night doing God knows what. "Did you order for me, baby?" she cooed, batting her eyelashes at Hooper. "Yeah," he replied flatly, putting his arms behind his head and leaning back on the booth, knocking the poor woman behind him with his elbow. "Did you remember my—" "Yes, for fuck's sake," he interrupted her. "I remembered the hot tea. You repeated yourself enough to make a fucking bird remember it." "Don't get angry, puppy." "Don't fucking call me puppy, I told you." He turned toward her, playfully threatening her with his fist, and then they both burst into laughter. As they chattered on, arguing playfully, I turned to Jasmine. "They seem to be getting along swimmingly, wouldn't you say?" "Yeah, it's kind of gross, actually. Did she just call him puppy?" She made a gagging motion, pretending to stick her finger down her throat. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure that just happened. No good can come of this." "I don't know if I really like these greasy breakfast places, to be honest. They seem so corny and faux 50s, she said, visibly disgusted upon examining the place. "Yeah, it's like the Fonz is going to come riding up on a motorcycle and hit the jukebox." "Maybe we can hit up a sock hop later." "That's foul." "The Enchantment Under the Sea dance?" "You're a nerd," I pointed at her, mockingly. She giggled and grabbed my hand, pulling it down between our knees. "Am not," she said, sticking out her tongue. "Sure are." This was one of those moments I knew I'd enjoy even more upon retrospect. This restaurant was just contrived enough, just TV American enough, just filled with strangers enough for us to really get on the topic of being human beings. "What do you guys think about this economic meltdown bullshit?" Hooper said, out of the blue, confirming my sense that we were going to have another in this trip's long line of really good conversations. "Nothing too terrifying will come of it, I don't think," I said, tapping the tabletop with my fingers along to the big bopper on the piped radio. "What about the crazy unemployment rates, the rising gas prices, peak oil, world government? What about globalization and all the world is flat shit?" said Jasmine. "Damn, girl, you've been doing your homework. I just don't want to get scared is all. I just don't think that this type of thing is beyond our capability. As a cumulative history of people living on Earth, I'd say we've been pretty good at figuring out solutions to our problems," I said. "We haven't figured out any of our problems," Roxy interrupted. "We've only created new ones." "Isn't that the spirit of a good challenge? Can you ever just know everything? No. Can you solve all the problems at once? No. But what you can do is work hard to fix what's wrong, instead of complaining about it all the time." "What about our crumbling social structure? The inner cities falling apart as the suburbs go up only to declare bankruptcy? The widening gap between rich and poor? Or the destruction of the middle class?" Roxy was visibly irritated. "I'm going to school for urban engineering. I know something of the infrastructure of the United States, and we're completely fucked. Soon enough, no suburban families will have enough money to pay for gas to put in their lawnmowers, let alone their SUVs. Can you imagine walking 10 miles to the nearest grocery store with a little red wagon? These areas of our country are going to become ghost towns." "Says who? You're an urban engineer. Why don't you think of a way? Why can't we fix it instead of stubbornly proclaiming its inefficacy? How about developing sustainable communities? The world doesn't have to depend on oil forever. That's what I want to see. I don't see disasters in the choices we've made as a society. I see challenges, sure, but I don't want to think of that as a bad thing. Do you have any kids? She asked. No. Well, I'm sure you have friends who do. Do you fear for their children? What kind of world do you think they'll inherit? One that's better than it is now if we can give it to them. It was around this time that we began to draw the attention of the general public surrounding us. People were now more intrigued than they were terrified, and some even wanted to take part in the conversation. Sitting at the table across the way were a clean-cut young couple with an infant in tow. A man nearing 30, doughy, with a receding hairline. He was wearing an olive polo with khaki shorts, a healthy spray-on tan, and a speaking louder than words at the moment cross hanging around his neck. Let me tell you kids something, and you'll be smart to listen. I've heard a bit of your conversation, and I don't like what I hear. I could see Hooper's brow begin to quake. This was a malleable moment in time, one that could turn out in many unpredictable ways. Lay it on us, said Jasmine, sensing the tension. If you would only trust in the law... Hooper Felonious spat coffee all over the table in front of him before forcing the rest of his mouthful down his throat, not wanting to waste a second of time before coming unglued on the poor man. Here we go. Of all the preposterous things that you could possibly say, you start off with that? Excuse me? Trust in the Lord? To what? Make everything better? To wipe that syrup off your chin? If he could, and you'd better believe I want to kick myself in the ass for even giving this topic a single breath, then why the hell doesn't he? Hooper was cracking his knuckles and staring directly at the man. Well, the Lord works... Yeah, in mysterious ways, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you say that out loud to yourself a time or two? My boss forgot payroll review again this year. Perhaps he works in mysterious ways. Yes. Or maybe he doesn't want to pay you any more money because you're a worthless fuck that doesn't deserve it. How about that? What's your name, man? As Hooper poked at his coffee spit with a napkin, I was trying to bridge the gap, preserving the semblance of a structured conversation. Frank. Well, Frank, let's not argue down dead-end paths. We're all atheists here, right? I looked at Hooper, Jazz, and Roxy individually for a look of confirmation before continuing. We'll have to establish that before we talk about religion. If that makes you uncomfortable, we'll never be able to talk about this without making you very upset. I appreciate that. Now, what is it that you wanted to say before you were so rudely interrupted by my well-meaning but foul-mouthed friend here? I was going to say that if you folks would just trust in the Lord, all of our problems will be solved. Do you really think that's true? Of course I do. Why? Because the Bible says so. Does it? I looked at him in the eyes. Where? Well, not specifically. He was beginning to get nervous. I get where you're going with this. God's plan and all that. No matter what kind of horrible shit goes down on earth, we'll all be okay in heaven, right? Basically, yes. I trust in the Lord to make things better. Has he? Well, yeah. I mean, we have wonderful technology and doctors and colleges and all of that. And what does any of that have to do with God? Well, he created us. So what? What did he do after that? Wreck up the place? Flood it? Get pissed off? Send off his boy to get killed? If he made us in his image, aren't we just doing what we've always been doing? Won't he? What do you mean? What does God care for what we do? I thought you said you don't believe in God. I can do it for the sake of argument. I went through all of this already, sir. God is a function of language to me. A literary device. A symbol of infinite possibility. I've had to answer all of these questions for myself. Well, we know he cares because of his unconditional love for us. So wouldn't that mean that no matter how bad we fuck up down here on earth, we have a chance to be saved in heaven? Isn't that what unconditional means? Yes. So why would he give a fuck what we do? What does it matter if he even exists when we won't find out until we're dead, and he'll forgive us anyway? We're just trying to live out our lives like you live yours, sir. We mean no harm. If you know more about the world and the nature of the divine than we do, then by all means let us know about it." The man was speechless. He looked at his wife, shrugged, and took a bite of his pancakes. A few chews later, he muttered, "Just try to keep it down, okay? I'm trying to eat with my family." I looked around the table again, at the other three around me, glancing at Roxy a little longer. "So what brings you here this morning? I have to say I didn't expect to see you here." "I like Hooper. He's my little puppy," she said, smiling and petting the back of Hooper's head. "I told you not to call me puppy," said Hooper, threatening with a fork this time. "So, Roxy, you said you were studying urban engineering. What are you planning on doing with that degree?" "Oh, I don't really know. Hooper and I were talking last night about sustainable housing, and I've kind of been interested in that. My family in Virginia just bought a new house that's self-sustaining." I looked at Hooper, who caught my glance and flashed me a knowing smile. "What do you think about the suburbs?" "Ugh, worst idea ever. Just another reason for the car companies to get rich. Fuck mass transit, everyone has cars. It's America. We're all filthy fucking rich except the bums populating our decaying inner cities." "What about gentrification?" "Too slow, too unpredictable. Besides, it just kicks out the low-income families to another area. It doesn't solve the problem." "What do you think about the mortgage crisis?" "Another symptom of our stupid oil-sucking pollution machine." "Fair enough. What do you think we can do to make a change?" I don't even know." She let out a long sigh and looked off into the distance. "I'll tell you what we need to do," said Hooper. "We all need to get to work on our problems rather than sitting around idly chatting about it." "Preach it, brother!" shouted a grungy-looking man from the bar area. This was the first lull in our conversation, where no one had dared to change the topic or elaborate further on fixing our problems. The truth is that no one even knows what our problems were. This time in history, like all, was a strange one. For a bit of historical context, this was just under 10 years into the second millennium of the Common Era. We lived in the United States of America, where the citizens were constantly at each other's throats on moral issues while losing sight of being trapped on a rock in space and the fact that we're all going to die anyway. We were the generation coming of age in this strange world of exponential technological advancement ballooning into potentially dangerous manifestations of Orwellian dreadfulness and levels of human idiocy and fear that Orwell himself could have never predicted. We all just felt like something wasn't right on Earth, and also sure that others felt the same way. We had been led into this modern lifestyle without really coming to grips with or understanding the full cost of some of the processes we relied on so heavily to maintain our progress. We didn't really expect God to do anything about it anymore, and we all sort of figured it was time to start putting our heads together to make a better life for all people and not just a few of them. All right, here we go," said Chad, coming up to the table with a platter of food. I don't think any of us had noticed him approaching. "Fuck yeah, Denver scramble," said Hooper, staring at the platter and rubbing his hands together. "Denver scramble," said Chad, barely setting down the plate before Hooper began devouring it. "And some biscuits and gravy for you, my dear." "Oh, thank you, honey," cooed Roxy. "My pleasure. And here you go, man." He set my food down in front of me. "Thanks, dude." He turned to Jasmine. "Pancakes. Just pancakes. Chocolate chip. Figured you'd like that." Jasmine giggled when he set them down in front of her, clapping her hands quietly with wide eyes. "Yay, chocolate chips." "Spot of tea for one, coffee for the rest. I'll be back in a bit to check on you. Try not to upset the natives, okay? Some folks around here are trying to eat, not get a religious dissertation." "Fuck 'em," said Hooper, with grits falling from the corners of his mouth. "We'll try to keep it down, thanks, Chad," I said, trying to be upstanding. We all sat gorging ourselves for a moment before we slipped back into conversation. "This guy kind of reminds me of you back in your foodie days," said Hooper, pointing at me with his fork. "How so?" I responded, as if to an accusation. Look at him. He's so good at his job he has to make it interesting by challenging himself. He's bussing tables twice as fast as the busboy. Look! He pointed at the busboy across the room, whose pants were sagging below his ass cheeks. He was waddling slowly around the dining room, picking up plates one by one and walking them to the bus station individually. Chad was the only server in the place, from what I could tell, which gave him 30 or so tables, depending on how you counted the bar seats. He was practically running circles around the kid, on top of doing his own job, which was probably the job of at least 2 people. You're used to doing that shit too. I remember sitting and watching you handle groups of 20 people, from cash register to cooking to the bar. You flirted with the old ladies, you called the polo shirts sir, and you fished for tips without breaking a sweat. It's all true. He's got 1 foot out the door, just like you did. That guy is way too smart to be working in this fucking place. Let's ask him, I said. That's a good idea. Hooper stood up at once and looked around the room for Chad. Chad, yo! Come over here for a second, he bellowed, over everyone else's conversations. He held up a finger at us without looking back as he finished up the order he was taking at another table. What's up? Everything tasting okay? You gonna work here for the rest of your life? I knew that laugh. I went to UNC for a while, studied history, and got fed up with the bureaucracy. Think you'll go back? Said Hooper. Fuck no, man, it's a racket. I'd rather just work here and focus on my music. A musician, I butted in. I should have known. Keep on fighting the good fight, dude. We'll let you get back to work. Sorry to bug you. No sweat. Wish I could stick around and chat a bit, but there's work to be done and dollars to be made, Chad said, impatiently tapping his notepad with his pen. Fuck them. Let them wait. We're much cooler. I think we're done here. You should run my tab now. Will do. Be right back. He trotted off to another table that had just been seated. So, what's next? Said Hooper. I've got to get out to a job site today. What are you guys doing? How much longer will you be in town? I figured I'd leave tomorrow afternoon. What do you have going on after work? I'm going to take a long nap and then watch some TV and scratch my nuts for a while before I head back to bed. I'll drop by your place before I take off for sure. I think I might grab my car and kick it around Durham with Jazz for a while today. I'll catch up with you in the morning. Sounds like a plan. Chad came around and dropped off the check without a word. Hooper signed his receipt, left a large tip, got up and left as he so often does. I sat at the table with Jasmine and Roxy. Well, what are y'all going to do with your day? She said, chomping on gum and twirling her hair with her finger. I looked at Jasmine, waiting for her to make the first move. I don't know. I might go home and take a nap, too. It's been a long few days. She looked as if she might have had a great deal on her mind.